Well, that was quite a benediction, and that was preceded by quite a different cut from a different kind of a cloth inaugural speech that Donald Trump, now the 57th President of the United States, gave soon after being sworn in. Let me go across straight to our guest, Ambassador Manjeev Puri, former senior diplomat, joining us. What did you make of that inaugural speech? Because it did sound more like a State of the Union address with a lot of agenda thrown in, very specific points, rather than just talking about lofty ideas and agenda in terms of what was there in the speech?
Thank you very much. The speech was vintage Donald Trump, but I think in a comeback mode. He was the 45th president, now he's the 47th, something which has only happened very rarely. And in a sense, did he not articulate all the things that he said during the campaign and in the days following his election? Look at even the mention of Panama, mention of China, make America great again. All this is true. But, look, he wants to be a president who will move and shake things. He's not afraid of being disruptive. That's what he says. But he simply wants America to be respected and loved and become the greatest country on the earth. Well, he's the president, the leader of the most important country in the world, the largest economy, very, very, very powerful nation, and much strength in his hands. We wish him all the best in the interest of his country and in the interest of the world.
Yes, certainly. I'll come back to you. But let me just tell all our viewers that soon as President Trump was sworn in, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi also congratulated him on being sworn in as US President. In a social media post, the PM said, and I quote, "Congratulations, my dear friend, President Donald Trump, on your historic inauguration as the 47th President of the United States. I look forward to working closely together once again to benefit both our countries and to shape a better future for the world. Best wishes for a successful term ahead." So those were the words that were used by Prime Minister Modi. And Ambassador Puri, what do you make of how Donald Trump has said that he will carry out certain things through executive orders, but there were some omissions as well? He did not mention something that he stirred up right before he assumed office, issues that he will ensure that there is peace, or the conflict in Ukraine with Russia is ended within 24 hours of his taking office. He didn't mention Greenland, he didn't mention Canada, making it the 51st state.
You're absolutely right. From what I heard, I didn't hear Canada and I didn't hear Greenland. I felt a bit relieved, I must tell you. But, he did say peace. And he said, we will end all wars. I will be a peacemaker and so on. Look, in my personal opinion, the Ukraine-Russia conflict is eminently endable. And he can do it by, by not just being persuasive, but by actually making it such that both parties come to an agreement, more so by making it difficult for Ukraine to continue to be in the conflict. Now, having said all this, of course, he has every reason to sit and say that, look, my election resulted in the Gaza ceasefire. That's a right that he certainly has, because it's just happened yesterday. So let's see what happens. If truly he remains a president for peace, I think that would be a very good thing for the world, because that's what the world needs at this time.
Yes, the point when he made that about the ceasefire taking place in Gaza just before he took over drew universal applause. Even now former President Biden got up. And that was not the case with a lot of other things that Donald Trump said, such as renaming the Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America, drill baby drill. Also about the Panama Canal, that we'll take it back, and so many other points that he made. The point on Mars, although again drew universal applause, and the camera cut to Elon Musk as well.
Mr. Elon Musk has much to gain in all of this. I think electric cars are now left far behind. Now we are talking of SpaceX and satellite-based communication. Why not? Man on Mars. Look, I am no scientific wizard to be able to answer that question. But, from whatever little I recall, that's a very, very tough order. And within 4 years, let's see. Right now, the reality is that they have 2 astronauts stuck in the space station.
Right. Now, could you tell us what is this prospect of two national emergencies that he's mentioned, one for the southern border and the other on the question of energy? He's saying drill baby drill, but already the US has been drilling substantially much more than it used to a few years back.
So the emergency on the southern borders, in my understanding, first it gives a very strong symbolic message that I'm going to be strong on the issue of illegal migration. The southern border is the issue, and hence we are going to take the strongest possible action. But there's also a tactical side of it. It allows you to unlock funds in the Defense Department, which are truly the large amounts of money which are available for you to be able to take action, whether it's deployment of additional people there or whatever you may call tougher border measures, the wall, etc., etc. So that's one thing. In terms of the national emergency on energy, I am not very clear. But, I do think he will roll back the orders which President Biden signed into effect just a few days back, which were to prevent drilling in several parts of the Arctic coast and so on and so forth. And I'm sure he would be very strong on allowing the drilling for hydrocarbons. He's made no bones about it. He's been very crystal clear about it. And so was the secretary, the nominated Secretary for Energy, in terms of his own nomination hearings at the Senate. So I do think that will happen. The emergency perhaps allows you, in technical terms, to unlock some of the ways and means in which the United States federal government is able to work there, because I think there are some issues about states' rights and so on and so forth.
All right. Just stay with us, Ambassador Puri. My colleague Jessica Taneja is also with us, because even after the inaugural speech is over, we've had things coming out of the White House as well. Jessica, what do you have in terms of what the White House has been saying? Perhaps more agenda points and executive orders are being sort of teased out by the White House.
That's correct, and most of the ones that you've discussed are the ones that the White House has released so far. We don't have an updated information on the releases that you point out at this point, but yes, the ones that you've discussed are the most important and the concrete ones, especially when you talk about naming the Gulf of Mexico, or when it comes to the national emergency bill, or the one where national emergency is to be declared on the border of Mexico, something on the expected lines from earlier as well. But from
there's something about the Paris Climate Accord as well,
who has apparently, while briefing the Republicans earlier, had also given a feeler of sorts as to what you can expect from those executive orders. So yeah, pretty much on the lines of what you had expected. No mention of Greenland, surprisingly, there, as Ambassador Puri was also pointing out. But yes, when it comes to Panama, you heard him say outright that no, it was not given back to for the Chinese to operate, but for American interests, of course. Crucially, he wants to take back Panama, and with the inaugural speeches does reflect exactly what the kind of political theatre, both in the domestic front and the international front, that he had promised and he's set to deliver. Now, what comes in his way to deliver these executive orders, and by when do we expect the implementation, especially when he talks about tariffs and making America a manufacturing hub again? You see the mention of manufacturing automobiles here, cancelling the previous climate agreements. You saw what he did with the Paris Climate Accord back then, and of course the COP28 as well, just that took place. He's not really a fan of green energy to that effect, not even electric vehicles. He wants to be able to make automobiles which use energy sources, and he wants to, as you said, and you pointed out, as he said in his inaugural speech as well, drill baby drill, again reiterating what we saw and heard from him in his previous term, and he this time, of course, is set to continue as well with those.
Yes, China, Manjeet Puri, figured only in terms of the context of Panama. Iran didn't figure at all. No talk of North Korea, where Donald Trump took a major initiative to meet Kim Jong-un, the only serving US president to meet a North Korean leader in the history of the two countries. But no mention of that this time around.
And there was limited amount of time. This entire ceremonial event has to get over. So there has to be a prioritization. My understanding is that Greenland wasn't mentioned because perhaps there has been some kind of an understanding that, look, there's a European country involved, a NATO member, Denmark. In any case, be a substantial military presence there. Let's see how all of this can work out. And of course, Korea, Iran, etc., were really not things which have been articulated about in very big manner in the recent past weeks. On Panama and through Panama, he did make the important point of China, i.e., there is, I believe, the Chinese vice president who's present there. So, when you look at all that, he did make the point of China, China being the top contestant, if I may say so, the other country which is sort of vying for the world. And he made it very clear, we will be the greatest, we will be most respected, and everyone will look to us, respected and loved together. Difficult things to achieve. But he said that would be the thing. Perhaps minding the fact that there was an invited guest invited by him who was present there, but the point certainly made and not lost at all.
Right. Jessica, if we go into all the things that Donald Trump said, especially in terms of what could possibly tackle the cost of living crisis, he's promised that he'll halve the cost of most things, especially energy, within the 6 months of his term. Now, did he indicate, gave a sufficient indication as to how he'll go about doing it in his inaugural speech?
These are the executive orders whose details have been provided to the effect that the implementation bit of it would be given out later. But what you can understand with what Trump means when he talks about bringing down the cost of things, and especially food on the table for people, is also at the end of the day bringing down the cost of bread and something as essential as eggs on the breakfast table, and for especially for milk and eggs. And apart from looking at the items that are extremely costly right now for average Americans, and this is something he said he'd focus on. Now, he hasn't given an adequately detailed plan of how this will be executed. Even when you start talking about tariffs, not just the cost of living, on how he plans to work around that. Even when you talk about the tariffs on the first day, as he says he wants to come out with, there are no particular details on which countries will it begin with first, and expectations are it would be first Mexico, and of course hinting at how the Chinese trade balance hasn't been something that Trump wants to ignore in this particular term to begin with. But yes, these continue to remain his priorities, but not too many details given around how hundreds of these executive orders which have been broadly outlined in the past as well, and even till the build-up of today's inauguration, will actually be put forth. Where will the budget come from? For instance, you talk about sending border guards to the forces to the southern border. So that will require excessive funding at this point, and where will that funding come from? Where will those cuts be made? So of course, all of this must have been worked out to a certain level, but the details of that will be provided later.
Yes, certainly. Ambassador Puri, clearly the success of his initial days or months of his presidency by the American voters, especially those who voted for him, or even the American populace in general, will be measured in terms of how he addresses the cost of living crisis. It's not just about inflation. Inflation had gone up to a certain level in 2022, almost in the vicinity of 10%, 9.1% or something. Now it's down to a little over 2%. So not inflation, but actual prices, bringing them down. Do you think that is something that Donald Trump will be able to deliver with the kind of things that he's planned?
I have no idea whether he can deliver, but it's, easier said than done. And this was his advantage. He took advantage of the fact that the price of eggs was higher in 2024 than it was in 2020. Fair enough. That's the way politics turns out, and people look at their own pockets. On climate change, the ticker is saying that they were going to withdraw from the Paris Accord, Paris Agreement. That's exactly what they did in 2016. Of course, do remember it takes its own time before the withdrawal becomes effective. Well, this was not along unexpected lines. It's something that people were anticipating, fair enough. But I think much has happened on the climate front. Even the United States, subnational activities have taken place, and the huge amounts of development of technologies, including, let me say, he may not be particularly wanting to push green hydrogen, etc. But the Inflation Reduction Act in the United States will ensure that a lot of the green technologies get a great deal of push and so on. Now, in terms of reducing price for hydrocarbons fuel, which is the main important thing in the United States, if you are able to increase the supply, you will be able to reduce the cost of the fuel. And if somehow or the other Russian oil can also flow to Europe and elsewhere, there would be a easing of the petroleum costs, and people will feel the difference. Now, how much of this actually can get done and so on, we'll have to see and wait and see. But I want to make one other point to you. Two places were mentioned. One was Mexico. You would agree, not in a particularly, let me say, friendly manner. The other was Panama.
Yes.
But on the northern side, perhaps not much said, neither Canada mentioned nor Greenland, and rightly so. But isn't this the old United States, the one that we are talking about, the Monroe Doctrine, etc.? And he referred to that in terms of the greatest president the United States has had, of the times going back to before Teddy Roosevelt, which we are talking about the 1920s and so on and so forth.
Yes, President
And
McKinley.
so the United States and its hegemony was look south. That was our hegemony. So, well, let's have a look. The president from Mar-a-Lago.
And if you could identify areas where perhaps, although he's made these big ticket announcements that he wants to carry these measures out, he will face a formidable amount of opposition, especially from the Democrats.
Not only that, let's remember that in the House, there's a razor-thin majority that the Republicans have got. Even to get the House Speaker elected, he had to personally intervene with a lot of them. And now, there are several things that come up. Every 2 years, there are elections for the House Congressmen and Congresswomen. The Senate goes to the polls. The senators, as well as the congressmen and congresswomen, they need to look at their own electability. It was all very good when he was running for that. But when it comes 2 years later, they're going to be there. And they have to become answerable to their own people. So all very well to be with him at this particular time. But in the end, they also have to look at their own interest. And this razor-thin victories, the razor-thin majorities in Congress are such that you can say, of course, you have a majority. What a good idea that you have the House, you have the Senate and the presidency with the same party. Excellent. But do remember, it's razor-thin, and just one or two, if they say no, it can become quite a different kind of picture. But yes, it's an opportunity for him, and he has created the opportunity by leading the Republicans to a major victory. A victory for the first time, which has seen a Republican presidential candidate win the majority of votes in the United States. I think it's after 20 years. So all credit to him.
And he's talked about being a peacemaker and unifier, and then at the same time he's talked about a colorblind and merit-based society. He's talked about only two genders being recognized. Do you think these would help unify the US in the coming days?
Look, when I switched on the set, I heard him speak about there will be only two genders. I may come from a conservative background, but I think the United States has moved quite a lot on. And while we can keep saying that the woke agenda didn't work very well for the Democrats, the fact of the matter is that it's not an agenda that you can recap in the bottom. And so Mr. Trump will certainly have an issue with these people. However, these are people and institutional arrangements who are not those who voted him. And that particular tension and that contestation will continue over the next 4 years. There's no doubt. The Democrats at the moment cut a sorry figure, but this is also a time and an opportunity for them to build back. And will they be able to build back better? Let's see what happens. After all, let's remember in 2016 and all that happened after that, they were able to claw back into power, again as a result of Mr. Trump and what he was promising. But really speaking, the people were then judging him and saying, sorry, you spoke a lot, but nothing much. And we went through COVID, a lot of problems for us, and we want to look at the others. So let's see how all of this actually plays out. It's relatively, I wouldn't say easy, but you make all these announcements and pronouncements. In the end, if tariffs result in prices going up, how would the people react to that? So there are a
Right.
lot of issues that need to be looked at.
Yes, because Trump in his speech also said that tariffs are paid by foreign countries, which is not exactly correct. Tariffs, if imposed, bring in products, imported products, and then the cost is extracted from those who buy it. So it'll be ultimately the end users, the consumers at retail, who will pay more of the ticket price of these items, the MRP, as its maximum retail price, as its minimum, I'm mixing a maximum minimum, I think, maximum retail price that is known as in India. I want to draw out this issue of being a peacemaker, unify even more. My colleague Amrit Pal Singh is also joining us. Amrit, it was said that it was a need of the hour to be sounding statesman-like as far as this inaugural speech is concerned. Do you feel that Trump has done that? Because he's talked about being a peacemaker and unifier, a thing that the world and the US itself needs. But do you think the kind of agenda that he's laid out will ultimately provide that to the country and the world? Amrit, can you hear me?
Although, may I step in?
Yes, yes, sure. Ambassador Puri.
Let me say, Gautam, now you're giving me a segue to speak about some slightly more complex issues of US foreign policy.
That's right, Gautam. Basically, he said that
Amritpal, you're carrying on, isn't it?
Hold on, sir. Let me just get this sorted out. We seem to have some mixed audio here. But please go ahead, Manjeev Puri, if you can hear me.
Yeah. So, Gautam, let me take you back. Generally speaking, over the past 30, 40 years, the Republican presidencies have followed an approach vis-a-vis Russia, the earlier USSR, which was really the country against whom they pitted themselves, a kind of G2 in the world. And the policy followed was generally called détente, which was you contain Russia. The Democrats, on the other hand, virtually from the time of President Carter and so on, the policy that they followed, the neocon approach, has been really to diminish Russia. Now, one entire set of theories say that is what resulted in the end, that your understanding of this containment versus diminishing them resulted in everything, including the entire business of Ukraine and the other issues which are there. Now, these are philosophical approaches to all of them. Both of them have worked in the past for the United States. I, for one, personally, I believe that at the moment, given the rise of China, so no matter that the Western world have been fighting among themselves and deciding the order of the world in the past, in the times that we are in now, and for the future, the rise of China is an absolutely new thing, and it is now at a level where, frankly, they're the only other major country in the world which is in a position to take on the United States. And at this time, perhaps it's better to follow détente rather than the neocon policy of diminishing a country which is part of the Western world, but with whom the Anglosphere in particular has always had a kind of contestation. And I'm talking about Russia.
Right. Well, let's see what kind of policy does Donald Trump take forward, because he tends to blow hot and blow cold, and perhaps some heart can also be taken from the fact that everything that Donald Trump says is not written in stone, or initiates is not written in stone, because look at what's happened with TikTok. He's the one who initiated the process to ban it when he was president the last time around, and now he's saying TikTok will survive in the US. Let me bring in my colleagues Jessica Tereja as well as Amritpal Singh. Jessica, just a word on how we can expect this presidency to go, keeping in mind Donald Trump's track record as the 45th president of the United States.
Gautam, this is Amrit here.
Yes, Amrit, go ahead.
Okay. Donald Trump has always been, even today, if his inaugural speech was any reflection, it was, the kind of rhetoric that we saw in the election. That kind of rhetoric was seen there. I mean, he said that the golden age of America begins today. We'll reclaim our sovereignty, etc.
Liberation Day.
Liberation Day. Radical and corrupt governments, the days of radical and corrupt governments. Joe Biden are over. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were sitting there. So they did not once stand up while he was getting standing ovations. They did not clap at that. He was
Just
very
once, when he
divisive.
mentioned the ceasefire in Gaza.
Yes, and also, he was calling them names on their face, saying that they were weak, fuzzy-headed, though these were not his words, but when he implied that when he said that, now we will reclaim our sovereignty, etc. Generally, these are seen in election campaigns, and on an inauguration, you do what you have to do, but you don't use this kind of a language. But that is Donald Trump. So, and during his term as the 47th president, we would see his personality reflect as it did during his tenure as the 45th president, and the executive orders that he mentioned, many of them are controversial, reclaiming the Panama Canal, etc. What he's calling declaring a national emergency on the southern border, still calling the illegal immigrants as criminals, aliens, people from the mental asylum to be deported, etc. So that kind of language which he used in the election campaign was evident today, and I think that will be reflected during his tenure as the 47th president of the United States.
Right. And Ambassador Puri, if I were to again ask you the question, if we look at the track record of Donald Trump as president of the United States when he was there for 4 years, do you think that that is something that he would think that is something that should be carried forward now, or something that needs to be avoided and a fresh track should be taken?
So, Gautam, I want to make a couple of points here. In 2016, when Donald Trump became president of the United States, he was relatively unprepared. And the people that he roped in were what we may call old-fashioned nationalists, patriots, military men, and so on and so forth. Those were also people who were, very gung-ho about Make America Great Again, but who also stood by constitutional principles, guardrails of the American democracy, etc., etc. This time, none of them are. The people with him, and he's also prepared. He's had that 4 years of the Biden administration to sort of prep himself up and get himself ready. And the kind of people he has with him are people who are achievers, no doubt, Elon Musk, etc. But, these are also people who are taken in by a great deal of, we can do it. And we can do it, and we will find the ways and means of doing it. Now, these are things which do have an opportunity, a possibility of, upsetting the guardrails, pushing against them, etc. So we'll have to wait and see how it works. The burdens of presidency itself are quite different from the possibilities when you are running an election campaign. And of course, he seems to have continued with that. If I refer to what Amrit Pal said, not looking at and making this into a nice, warm, welcome, inclusive event. Not at all. He wants to make his point, and let us also remember that his anger and vengeance at President Biden and all of them is not just from 2020, but is also from what has recently happened, the sentencing in New York, the report of Jack Straw, and so on and so forth. And he will continue to nurse this particular thing. I hope this particular nursing would not result in vengeance and hence a great deal of distraction from being able to pursue the other policies, which, let him give his best to make America great again and make the world a more peaceful place.
Right. And Amrit, do you think one thing that is different for Donald Trump this time around, which will be quite significant, is that not only does he have a trifecta with him, which is the Senate and a thin majority in the Congress, but also he has, got a composition of the Supreme Court that favors his conservative view. How effective or how helpful would this be in terms of the kind of things that he wants to do in the coming 4 years?
At least in the first 2 years, the kind of numbers that he has in the House of Reps and a thin majority in the Senate would work in his favor. Also, the composition of the Supreme Court, once elections for the Senate after 2 years are called in,
midterms.
Midterm elections. So, actually, every 2 years, 1/3 of the House changes. So, we'll have to see will he still retain the numbers. But at least now he has the numbers and he can push through the legislations So he comes, from a point of strength. And also what Ambassador Puri was saying, that this is not a novice businessman coming to administration like he did in 2016, with a lot of passion, of course, under his belt, but no administrative experience in the government. He's been president for 4 years. He knows how things run, and he has a mind of his own. You may agree or disagree with it, but he has a mind of his own, and he's got some ideas which may sound radical, but he's clear-headed, at least on them. So he has all in his working in his favor to push through his agenda, at least in the first 4 years, assuming that the Senate's composition changes after 2 years. But right now, in the first 2 years, he can push what he wants to.
Right. And as we speak, we've had Joe Biden and Kamala Harris departing as well. And Donald Trump has seen off his predecessor as well. And that, in its sense, tells us that we have a new man in place, not just in the White House, but the Oval Office. And pretty soon, those executive orders will start rolling out, and they'll be up on the White House website as well. Do you think, in terms of the order of how the executive orders are rolled out, will also tell us the priorities, which are the topmost ones, Ambassador Puri?
I'm not sure about that. I don't know in what fashion all of this turns out. But once an executive order is signed for the concerned agency or department, it becomes the presidential order, and they will start acting on it. Now, he's the president of the United States. You fire on several cylinders at the same time. And that's exactly what you're going to see. Some of them take time in coming into effect. For example, even in 2016, he withdrew straight away from the Paris Agreement. But it took a year before all of that actually went into fruition. The same thing will happen now. So he's done what he has to do, but the process then comes into play. And let's see what happens.
And Amrit, another thing is this thing on imposing tariffs and having an external revenue service. On one hand, you're initiating through another executive order, DOGE, which is the Department of Government Efficiency, and then you're saying we're going to launch another department altogether, which will take care of how tariffs are to be collected. Whereas tariffs are not really collected; they're imposed, aren't they? So is this this is a bit of confusion, isn't it?
He's basically trying to send a signal to the countries that he feels that are unjustly that America is unjustly being dealt with, and he wants to.
But what will an external revenue service collect?
You're right. In that sense, basically, he was, trying to say that, I will put a department in place which will impose these tariffs. There'll be, I assume there'll be negotiators. It's one thing to announce unilaterally that you will impose higher tariffs, like 25% on Mexico and Canada, 20% on the rest of the world, threatening China with 60%. But you have to deal with them also. So those, as Ambassador Puri would explain better, that these things are not done unilaterally. You have to, unless you want to cut off all diplomatic ties, but you can't do that with all of the world. So you will have to negotiate them. So I think what he's referring, that he'll pull out from the Foreign Office some people, probably not recruit new people, but pull out from the their foreign department or the Department of State, the State Department, and put them in this new service that he proposes to be negotiators on those tariffs. That is my understanding.
Right.
If I could Gautam ask Ambassador Puri to explain on it, because he's been a career diplomat and knows better than both of us how these things work.
Yes, an imposition of tariffs would in any case will be the incoming Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick's job, won't it, Ambassador Puri?
Gautam, doesn't the United States have a Customs and Border Protection Service? Don't
It
they
does.
levy or impose tariffs? Don't they collect customs duties? They do. So is this a renaming? They have a trade representative. In the good old days, that used to be part of the State Department.
I'm being told we're getting another address by Donald Trump. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Ambassador Puri, but let's listen in.